Do you remember those forgotten British breakfasts? The ones we can almost taste and still want back? In the 1970s, these simple morning meals filled our kitchens with warmth, chatter, and the smell of home before the day began. When did breakfast stop feeling like the start of something good? What can we even say about fried bread, other than that it was absolute heaven on a plate? Every morning in the 1970s started with that unmistakable sizzle from the frying pan. It was the sound of comfort, of routine, of home. Simple slices of white bread, fried in bacon fat or oil until golden and crisp on the outside but soft and chewy inside. Families would fight over who got the first slice, still warm, dripping slightly and sparkling with that thin layer of grease. It was not about fancy cooking or health trends. This was about using every last drop of flavor. Back then, no one threw out bread and no one feared fat. A proper breakfast meant fuel for the day, and fried bread gave exactly that. Today, it might make dietitians faint, but there was a kind of pride in making something so simple taste so perfect. It tasted like mornings before the world got too busy. Fried bread was proof that sometimes the best comfort comes from a single pan and a slice of yesterday's loaf. If fried bread was the heart of a British breakfast, then bacon rashers were its soul. The smell of bacon grilling in the kitchen was like a national anthem back in the 1970s. Every household had its preferred level of crispiness. Some liked it soft and pink, others cooked it until it snapped like glass. Either way, you knew the moment it hit the pan that breakfast had truly begun. The finishing touch? A drizzle of brown sauce, sharp and tangy enough to make your eyes water, but in the best possible way. That combination of smoky bacon and rich sauce turned a humble meal into a morning ritual. Back then, you did not measure calories, you measured satisfaction. Bacon was not a guilty pleasure, it was a reward for surviving another week of work or school. The sound of that grill and the smell that filled the house could pull even the sleepiest soul to the table. You might not find that same flavor today, but for those who remember, grilled bacon with brown sauce was Britain's true breakfast treasure. This was more than just breakfast. It was a childhood memory in an eggshell. Soft-boiled eggs with toast soldiers were the perfect mix of fun and comfort. You would tap the top of the egg gently with your spoon, peeling it open like a tiny present, and there inside was that bright golden yolk. You dipped your little toast strips in carefully, trying not to break them, even though everyone always did. It was a meal that taught patience. Wait just the right number of minutes for the yolk to stay runny, and you were rewarded with that buttery, savory perfection. Parents loved it because it was cheap and easy. Kids loved it because it felt like an event. Back then, mornings were slower, and people actually sat down to eat together. The soft egg, the crunch of toast, and the laughter at the table, all of it was a little ritual that made the day start right. Nowadays, we might rush out the door with a coffee, but nothing compares to the charm of an egg and its loyal soldiers. When the toaster clicked and the crumpets popped up, that was the signal that the day was about to begin properly. Those soft, airy circles full of tiny holes just waiting to soak up melted butter were magic. In the 1970s, this was the quick but comforting breakfast that fit into every kind of morning. Some people spread jam, but the real indulgence came from a drizzle of golden syrup. The way it pooled into the crumpet's little pockets was pure joy. You would take a bite, and the syrup would run down your fingers, and that was part of the fun. It was sticky, sweet, and honest. A proper working-class treat that felt special, even though it cost almost nothing. For families with kids, it was a breakfast you could make in minutes and enjoy together before running off to school. Even now, one whiff of warm crumpets brings back the hum of 1970s kitchens, the sound of kettles boiling, and the taste of mornings when life felt just a bit simpler. Now this was the kind of breakfast that made you feel like you could take on the world. Fat, sizzling sausages stuffed between thick slices of buttered white bread, squashed together until the juices soaked through. You could smell it streets away. In the 1970s, this was the breakfast of champions. Builders, factory workers, students, anyone who needed proper fuel. You did not need fancy ingredients, just good sausages, bread, and a dollop of brown or tomato sauce. Sometimes the bread was so soft that it tore, and nobody cared. It was messy, warm, and perfect. Packed lunches and fast food could not touch this kind of satisfaction. A sausage sandwich eaten at the kitchen counter, with steam fogging up the window, was Britain in its truest form. It was a small victory before the day's battles began. You finished it, wiped your hands on a napkin, or your sleeve, and you were ready for anything. Born out of leftovers, but loved like a king's meal, Bubble and Squeak was pure genius. The name came from the sounds it made while frying, bubbly and squeaky, cheerful and homely. Leftover potatoes and cabbage, maybe a few scraps of meat, all pressed together and fried until crispy on the outside and soft inside. In the 1970s, every home had their own version, passed down like a family secret. It was a dish that proved waste nothing, enjoy everything. Sunday's roast became Monday's breakfast, and that was half the charm. The smell filled the kitchen and lingered just long enough to make you hungry again. Bubble and Squeak was more than food. It was the smell of thrift, warmth and pride in making the most out of little. Today it is rare to see it on a menu, but back then it was a breakfast champion that brought everyone to the table for another go at yesterday's best bits. There was nothing quite like waking up to the slow bubble of porridge on the stove. Oats, milk, and a spoonful of golden syrup. That was all it took to turn a grey morning into something bright. In the 1970s, this was the breakfast that wrapped you up like a blanket from the inside. Families stirred it together in old pans, adding just enough syrup to turn the porridge a soft amber colour. It was thick, filling, and comforting. Kids might complain at first, but one taste and all was forgiven. For many, golden syrup porridge meant warmth, especially in cold houses before central heating was common. You could eat it fast before school or slow with a cup of tea. Either way, it felt like care in a bowl. We may chase fancier breakfasts now, but none will ever have that quiet magic of oats, syrup, and the smell of home on a cold morning. Before health advice took over, black pudding slices were a breakfast legend. Rich, peppery, and fried, just enough to get that perfect crust. They were the pride of a proper British fry-up. In the 1970s, black pudding was not a luxury. It was just part of life. A slice or two beside your eggs and bacon made the plate complete. Made from blood, oats, and spices, it might sound strange now, but back then it was just another way to use every bit of the animal. And it tasted incredible. The smell was strong, the flavour bold, and the satisfaction unmatched. You could find it in corner cafes, market stalls, and every family kitchen that believed in real food. It was hearty, unapologetic, and proud of it. People today might wrinkle their noses, but to those who grew up with it, black pudding was not weird. It was breakfast done properly. Few things sum up 1970s Britain better than tinned tomatoes on toast. It was humble, bright, and just about the easiest meal you could make. You opened the tin, warmed it on the stove, and poured those soft, sweet tomatoes over buttered toast until the bread nearly collapsed under the weight. It was cheap, filling, and oddly elegant in its simplicity. For students, families, or anyone counting pennies, This was the dish that never let you down. The tang of tomato mixed with the crunch of toast felt like the taste of home itself. It might not have been fancy, but it was dependable. And that meant something. When mornings were cold and money was tight, tinned tomatoes gave you color, warmth, and a little bit of hope. Even now, one bite can bring back 1,000 memories of simpler times. Ah, the mighty kipper. Smoked herring at its finest. Back in the 1970s, a plate of kippers was the height of breakfast sophistication, especially by the seaside. The smell was strong enough to wake the neighbors, but to those who loved it, that was part of the charm. The fish was smoky, salty, and rich with flavor, eaten with buttered toast and a strong cup of tea. For families who spent their holidays in coastal towns, kippers were tradition, a taste of the sea that stuck with you long after the trip ended. It was a breakfast that demanded attention and rewarded you for it. In today's grab-and-go world, few people would dare make such a bold-smelling meal first thing in the morning, but that is exactly why we miss it. It was breakfast with character, simple, honest, and unforgettable. There was something deeply comforting about pouring warm milk over a bowl of cereal back in the 1970s. Before cold milk and crunch became the standard, families across Britain knew this gentler version as the true morning classic. Cornflakes, Weetabix, shredded wheat. Whatever you had on hand would soften just enough to create that sweet, creamy texture that felt like a hug from the inside. It was the breakfast of early mornings before school, when fog steamed up the windows and the kettle whistled in the background. Parents would tell you it would stick to your ribs, meaning it would keep you going through a long day. Some sprinkled a bit of sugar, others added a banana slice if they were lucky. It was not about excitement, but about comfort, about knowing breakfast would always be waiting. Today, we might call it soggy, but back then it was cozy, nurturing, and filled with warmth in more ways than one. The way the spoon clinked against the bowl was the sound of an ordinary day beginning. There was something beautifully British about seeing a silver toast rack on the breakfast table, with golden brown slices standing neatly like soldiers on parade. It was not just about the toast, it was about presentation, pride, and the little rituals that made mornings feel proper. And what did every slice need? A generous spread of butter, melting instantly, followed by that bittersweet marmalade that defined the flavor of a nation. Seville oranges, chunky peel, and just enough sugar to make it sing. In the 1970s, everyone had their favorite brand, or maybe a homemade jar sitting on the counter. The combination of crunch and tang was unbeatable. It was breakfast you could linger over with a newspaper or a quiet chat before the rush began. The toast rack might seem fussy today, but it represented care, the idea that even an ordinary breakfast deserved a little ceremony. Few things in life were as dependable as toast and marmalade, perfectly warm and perfectly British. In the 1970s, before brunch became a word, we had eggy bread, simple, soft, and utterly satisfying. Thick slices of day-old white bread were dipped into beaten eggs, fried in butter, and served piping hot. The smell alone could pull every member of the family out of bed. Sometimes it was sweet, dusted with sugar, other times savory with a pinch of salt and pepper. Either way, it was magic. The kind of meal that made you feel clever for turning something cheap into something wonderful. Families loved it because it made use of leftovers, and kids adored it because it felt like dessert in disguise. The golden crust, the soft center, and the buttery taste made for the perfect comfort breakfast. You did not need syrup, you did not need fruit, just a pan, some eggs, and a bit of love. Every bite was a reminder that great food does not come from fancy recipes, but from a kitchen that knows how to make joy out of the ordinary. Few breakfasts packed as much satisfaction into a single plate as corned beef hash with a fried egg. Born from thrift and necessity, it became one of the most beloved comfort meals of the 1970s. Leftover potatoes, onions, and tinned corned beef were fried together until crispy on the outside and soft inside. Then came the crowning glory, a perfectly fried egg, yolk still runny, sliding down the hash with every forkful. It smelled of warmth and effort, of mornings that started early and ended well-fed. It was not glamorous, but it was honest. The kind of meal that said, "We make do and we make it good." For many working families, this was a weekday treat or a lazy Sunday favorite. The mix of salty beef and creamy yolk felt like a reward after a long week. In a time when every ingredient counted, corned beef hash proved that flavor could come from scraps as long as you had heart and a hot pan. Spam was the great equalizer of British kitchens in the 1970s. Cheap, easy to cook, and surprisingly delicious when fried to perfection. You would slice it thin, toss it in a sizzling pan, and let the edges curl up and crisp. Paired with a fried egg, it became an instant breakfast that could fill you up on the tightest of budgets. It was salty, savory, and strangely satisfying. Kids might have rolled their eyes at it, but they always cleaned their plates. Spam carried with it the echoes of wartime thrift, that waste-nothing mentality that still lingered decades later. It was proof that convenience did not have to mean compromise. The egg yolk soaking into that fried slice made for a flavor combination that has stood the test of time. It was the kind of breakfast that tasted far better than it had any right to. Simple, proud, and absolutely British. You could always count on grilled tomatoes and mushrooms to complete a proper 1970s breakfast. They balanced the richness of bacon and eggs with a hit of freshness. Or at least, that was the idea. Tomatoes were halved, sprinkled with a bit of salt, and grilled until their edges caramelized just right. Mushrooms went beside them, sizzling in butter, soaking up every drop of flavor in the pan. The combination added color and comfort to the plate. It was also an unspoken nod to health before anyone cared about calories. These vegetables were simple, but they made breakfast feel like a meal rather than a snack. Every cafe worth its salt had them, and every home cook knew the trick: never rush them. Let them take their time, just like mornings used to. They reminded everyone that even the simplest ingredients could shine when given a little patience and a lot of care. Before spreads came in colourful jars, there was bread and dripping, the ultimate symbol of post-war British practicality. Dripping was the leftover fat from a roast, saved in a small dish, cooling into a creamy layer of flavour. On cold mornings, people would spread it thick over a slice of bread, sprinkle it with a pinch of salt, and call it breakfast. It might sound humble, but in the 1970s, this was a taste of comfort and resourcefulness. Nothing went to waste, and every bit of flavour was treasured. The rich, savoury spread had a depth you just could not find in butter. It tasted like Sunday dinners, family warmth, and thrift wrapped into one. Today, people might wrinkle their noses, but for those who remember, bread and dripping was real food, honest, hearty, and proud of its simplicity. It was nourishment born from resilience, the kind that keeps memories alive long after the recipe has faded. Scotch pancakes were the sweet little heroes of the 1970s. Breakfast table. Smaller and thicker than regular pancakes, they were fluffy bites of happiness cooked right on the griddle. Served warm with a spoonful of jam or a spread of butter, They felt like a treat no matter the day. Families made them in batches, stacking them high and sharing them around with cups of tea. The smell of them cooking filled the house with comfort. They were simple enough for children to help with, and that made them even more special. Jam, usually strawberry or raspberry, would melt into the pancakes, leaving sticky fingers and smiling faces behind. Unlike the big American stacks of today, these were humble, homely, and meant for sharing. Each one carried a bit of love and laughter, the kind of breakfast joy that no packaged food could ever replace. They might be small, but they were the heart of many big memories. You could not walk through a British kitchen in the 1970s without finding a tin of beans and sausages. Tucked somewhere in the cupboard, it was the ultimate quick meal, cheap, easy, and ready in minutes. All you needed was a saucepan or even a microwave once they came along. The beans were sweet and saucy, the tiny sausages soft and flavorful in their own way. It might not have looked fancy, but it tasted like pure satisfaction after a long day or a quick breakfast before school. Parents loved it because it fed everyone for next to nothing. Kids loved it because it felt like a treat in a tin. It was warmth, nostalgia, and convenience all rolled into one humble can. The sound of the lid popping open and the smell that followed, that was Britain's breakfast anthem for an entire generation. If there was one thing a 1970s British home never did, it was throw away potatoes. Leftovers from dinner became breakfast gold the next morning. Sliced or chopped, they went straight into a hot frying pan until the edges crisped and browned beautifully. Sometimes a bit of onion joined the party, maybe even some leftover gravy or an egg cracked on top. It was the perfect example of make-do cooking that tasted far better than it had any right to. The smell alone could pull you out of bed. You did not need fancy tools, just yesterday's potatoes and a bit of patience. The result was crispy, golden comfort that made every morning feel special. In an era where thrift met creativity, fried leftover potatoes stood as proof that nothing good ever truly goes to waste. Not food, not memories, not even the simplest moments at the breakfast table. If ever there was a breakfast that felt like a warm hug from the past, it was a slice of thick-cut white bread slathered in jam. It was simple, cheap, and completely perfect in its own way. Back in the 1970s, almost every home had a jar of homemade jam sitting proudly on the counter, made from whatever fruit had been in season. That year, the sound of the butter knife scraping across the crust, the smell of fruit and sugar mingling in the air. That was the start of a proper morning. There was something special about how it stuck to your fingers, and you would lick them clean before reaching for your tea. Breakfast was not rushed. It was shared, savoured, and remembered. The thick bread, cut straight from the loaf, would soak up the butter first, and then the sweet, sticky jam spread right on top. Strawberry, raspberry, blackcurrant. Everyone had their favourite. The first bite was always messy, and that was part of the joy. It was the taste of childhood mornings and lazy weekends, when breakfast was slow and conversation was easy. You did not need fancy spreads or branded cereals, just a good slice of bread and the memory of summer fruit sealed in a jar. It was as British as it gets, humble, honest, and filled with love. There was something special about those warm, creamy bowls of ready breck or wheat germ on chilly 1970s mornings. It was breakfast designed to fight the cold and the hunger all at once. Mothers would stir it patiently on the stove, adding a spoonful of sugar or a drizzle of golden syrup to make it more appealing to sleepy kids. That smell of oats and milk was comfort in its purest form, filling the house before the sun had even risen. The steam would fog the windows, and you could see tiny faces drawn in it while everyone waited for their bowl. It was more than just breakfast. It was a ritual of warmth, patience, and care. The first spoonful was like eating warmth itself, smooth, rich, and comforting. The advertisements promised it would give you central heating for kids, and it really did feel like that. It was the kind of meal that filled you up and sent you out the door ready to face foggy mornings and schoolyard winds. There was pride in a clean bowl because it meant no one left the table hungry. Unlike today's sugar-heavy cereals, Ready Brek was simple, nourishing, and built on care. It might not have been exciting, but it was reliable. And in every home, reliability mattered. If these breakfasts stirred up a few memories or made you crave a taste of the past, share your favorite in the comments. Give this video a like to keep the nostalgia alive, and hit subscribe so you never miss another bite of Britain's forgotten mornings.